Been together so long we can't pretend. Remember the way we used to move, dance all night like young lovers do. Your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, he'll get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me, baby.
This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Someone who created Shebah,
Yes.
Australia's first and only female rideshare.
Correct.
And here we are doing
Here
this
we are.
show.
And I'm not there anymore. Now I'm here.
Yeah.
Eating chocolate cashews. It's good.
How good is that? That's a good result.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're here with me, and we are going to learn all about your journey with Shebah
Wonderful.
in this show. So in a little while, we'll deep dive into that because it's quite the story, and I
Yes.
think that there's a lot for us to learn from and be inspired by. In
Yes,
what
I
you
think
have
so.
done.
I hope so. I don't know. We'll just see how it goes, eh? Put on a raincoat and have a crack.
And also joining us today, we have independent candidate for Goldstein, Zoe Daniel, who also began on Broad Radio. That's not how she began.
Yeah. Got a first media break on Broad Radio. A little bit of time with foreign correspondent, ABC. No, but she's a friend of Broad Radio's, isn't she? Definitely.
Yes, she was one of our first co-hosts, and now she's gone off to, have a tilt at
Change the world.
The federal election. Amazing that these people are putting their hands up, the independents. So she's going to be joining us in a little while. And also, dementia is the leading cause of death in women. And
I
so
was shocked
today,
to see that.
yeah, can you believe that? So we're going to learn what it is like to live with dementia and also to be a carer for someone who is living with dementia. When adjunct Professor Kathryn Moyle, who is Dementia Australia advocate, she's going to be joining us later in the show as well. That's all coming up after this. As we always say. Oopsie, I don't know what happened there, but that's all.
Doesn't matter. It's live. That's the problem with live. Things happen.
Oopsie's my favourite response I've ever given.
Oopsie.
Oopsie. Look over there. Doesn't even matter.
Doesn't matter.
If you are watching live, very welcome. It'd be lovely to see your thoughts and comments and
Please.
questions as you're watching with us today on Facebook or YouTube. And as always, we say you can catch up on any episodes, previous or this one even, via podcast, Broad Radio on the go, wherever you get your podcasts. It would be lovely if you just go back. I mean, amazing interviews that you can deep dive in and really, really binge and enjoy that.
Story arc.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Follow it all the way.
So, we're going to, before we get to our first guest, I needed to mention to you, George, that
Yes.
last night I went along to see The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson.
Oh, I want to see this film so much. Were you at a sneaky peek premiere thing?
I'm
Preview?
lucky enough to be a member of ACTA, so I got
wow.
invited to a Q&A with Leah Purcell, who wrote, directed and performed in it.
Good.
I cannot tell you how amazing this film is.
Truly.
And Leah Purcell is, I think, one of Australia's greatest talents, and why she is not one of the world's superstars. I don't know.
Because there ain't no justice, that's why.
It's true.
She should be. So she was really just kicking it, wasn't she, in this?
Oh, my God. So the film is breathtaking. I left and just went, well, that is as good as any Oscar-winning film I've ever seen.
Gosh.
It's so beautiful. The fact that it's a hardcore performance, so it's a pretty traumatic story.
Yeah.
But that she's going from directing the scene to then the space of being that performance.
How do people do that? To carry that much information in their heads and be able to change perspective and roles, and
it's like two different heads.
Totally.
She's like literally putting one head on, and then like that's how it feels to me that she would have to do that.
Amazing.
Skill, like the skill, right?
And be so aware of everyone around her too, not just the crew, but all the other cast and all the extras and all the lighting people, the sound people, and it's huge.
Exactly. Like directing is already a science, and then to add acting on top of that, and she wrote it, and it's so clever too as a business. So her partner is her business partner as well, and so she wrote this, The Drover's Wife, as a play,
right,
for Belvoir, in Sydney. Then it became a novel. Now it's a film, and they're just working on a series as well. God. So they're really clever with their IP.
Yeah,
they're just going, how do we add and add and add and do different versions so every audience gets something different and new. It's amazing, right?
But you can always tell the writing's good when it's been a play, because it just has to be perfect, doesn't it? A play has to speak to exactly what the issues are.
Well, you know, when an audience doesn't like it.
You sure know, really, straight away.
Yeah. So an incredible talent as a writer as well. So Leah Purcell, and I was lucky enough to see her in this Q&A last night, and honestly, I couldn't love a person more. Like, I am so deeply in love with her.
Yeah. Leah Purcell, here's your number one fan.
Watch out.
Yeah.
I would fangirl hard if I were to meet her.
It's a little bit look who's stalking at the moment, isn't it? It's a little bit too. I love her so much.
I do. A little bit. Yeah. But I bring it up not just to say, everyone, please go and see this incredible, incredible film. But I wasn't going to go because I'm so busy.
You are busy.
We're all busy.
Yeah.
But so tired and so busy, and I knew that it would mean that I'd be getting to bed later because I had to do the work and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, it's too hard. And then I was just like, do you know what? I just need more fun in my life.
You do need fun, but fun costs, doesn't it?
But how do we, we always hear from everyone, wellness world, you've got to look after self-care, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of go, how? And I chose last night to prioritise the fun.
Yes.
But is it possible? How do we do this?
I don't know the lady who's done it. And if she has, good luck to her, and she probably won't be telling any secrets soon, because it's just, I've never found the way to do it. Like, I just figure everything costs me something, and I can only make the least bad choice at any given time. It's a bit grim, isn't it, to look at it that way? But if you want to stay out and have fun, you knew you were going to be grumpy the next day with the kids or whatever you had to do. But yeah, it does seem to be a real burden. I'd love to know how people actually prioritise things like that.
Well, it's a bit of part of the mental load that we carry is on top of all of the other things we have to remember. We also now have to look after self-care.
Yeah, well, no one else is coming. I've found that if I don't prioritise it, no. And you do, like you came in today so fulfilled and excited and enriched, which is what art and all those experiences are meant to do, right? They're not depleting experiences. They're really gratifying and deeply connect you to other human beings, which is what we want. Connection is key. But it is really hard if you can't get out to do that, or it's going to cost you, like, not just money, but really, more importantly, your time.
And I think that's a really good point you make. Like, I chose it because I knew I would be invigorated, and I have been, absolutely. Yeah. But I am able to then get a babysitter and do this. So I could afford the babysitter, and I had someone I could call on to be a babysitter. Yeah. I mean, later on in the show, we're speaking with Kathryn Moyle, who is a carer for her partner and her mother, who both are living with dementia. Yeah. She may not have that option as a carer.
No, it's a very tough thing. And the people who are giving the most are the ones who most need these kind of enriching experiences, because you're trying to pour from an empty cup all the time. Oh. It's really, really full on. But I don't know, at least you get Mother's Day once a year. That makes it you get a bit of crumbly toast in your bed and some cold tea.
And I tell you, my bucket was so full after Mother's Day.
Enriched, full to overflowing. Weren't you? You were just like the Nile Delta after that.
It's Look, I guess the answer is that we need to try and be that for other people. That's the answer,
and also
isn't it?
remind you that, having fun is all we've got, really. Like, you've got to go and make time for fun. And you can always sleep later.
Yeah.
You'll catch up eventually. Although that's not what the Dementia report says, does it? I read a fair bit about that. Going, no, it doesn't matter, just burn the candle. Oh, no, actually, probably it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea.
Oh, I don't know if there is an answer, but anyway, just go and
Yes.
see the film if you can.
Go and see it.
It is amazing. Well, look, someone who must be incredibly time poor and managing a huge amount of mental load is Broad Radio's own Zoe Daniel. She is running as an independent candidate for Goldstein in the upcoming election, but she has found time for us, and she is joining us next. It's only 2 weeks until Australia goes to the polls, although we can vote now if we wish.
Wow. You don't even have to be sick.
That's right. The pre-voting has begun. But I tell you, I can't wait for it to be over because this election seems more toxic than ever. I am so sick of it. So I can imagine someone who is running as an independent candidate must be heartily ready for it to be over, hopefully with a win. And so let's invite one such independent. I'm calling her Broad Radio's own, although maybe I can't do that for too much longer once she is a member of Parliament. Hello, Zoe Daniel.
Hello, Broad Radio. So nice to be back.
Oh, love. I will continue to call you Broad Radio's own forever,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Yeah, you got the T-shirts made now.
Yeah.
That's good. We've got people in high places, finally.
That's true.
And how are you going, Zoe? Is it? I mean, I've seen you all over the world, as many people will have, reporting from some of the most dangerous and difficult places on earth. How is the seat of Goldstein compared to, say, Burma just before revolution?
Look, it's been interesting, and I think that I've really grown and learnt a lot over the last 6 months. And obviously, as we've got closer to the election and I've become more and more competitive, this community campaign has become a real movement, then I guess the level of toxicity can be sort of measured against just how much of a threat you are.
Yeah,
so I think we could say that we are quite competitive at this point because it has been quite nasty in some ways. But that said, it's 99% incredibly energising, positive, and really quite inspiring, actually, because we have so much support and so many members of the community volunteering on the campaign. So there's just that small element of nasty, but I must say that my shell has grown quite hard over the last few weeks.
Well, I was going to ask you, what is some of the most shocking things that have happened during this campaign? Or have you been shocked?
Oh, look, I think, there's the obvious sort of overt issue around removal and vandalism of signs, nasty things being written on signs and put in people's letterboxes. One of our supporters who had a sign on their fence had dog poo put in their letterbox.
Oh my goodness.
Another one had human feces smeared all over the signs that were on her front fence. And we've replaced, I think, about 200 signs around Goldstein in the last few days that have been just torn off fences. Someone's been using box cutters to rip them off. So there's that. But then there's also just in the background, some nasties on social media and a lot of digging of dirt in the background by those who seek to prevent me from winning, whoever they may be.
Yeah.
And I guess I know a lot of journalists, so I know that dirt digging is going on.
True.
But it is quite discomforting to know that it's going on. So, it's a bit weird.
I have to declare my interest, Zoe, because I am fortunate enough to be a resident in your electorate, in the electorate of Goldstein, and I have fully thrown my support behind Zoe. And so I perhaps that's inappropriate when I'm building a media brand for me to have such a declared interest. But I'm not a journalist. I don't claim to be a journalist.
No.
So I'm using my own voice in the way that I see fit. But the thing is, Zoe, you are so backed by the community that it baffles me that people can think that you haven't got a right to do what you're doing, because the community has given you that power and said, please be the person that puts your hand up to do this.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think that's a little bit dangerous and not very clever from a strategic point of view is for those who are opposing this campaign to sort of try to pat it off as a bunch of outsiders trying to steal the seat, or, you know, a fake group, when I was nominated to be the candidate by a community organisation that sprung up from the grassroots in Goldstein. Originally, it was about 20 people who came together and said to each other, let's try to find an independent candidate. So it's not as if even I put myself forward to try to take the seat. The Voices of Group came to me and said, would you be interested in running? And we now have several thousand supporters signed up, and something like 12 to 1,500 volunteers who are out in the street today distributing leaflets at train stations or handing out how to vote cards at pre-polling stations. So it's quite dismissive, I think, to just say, oh, this is just a flash in the pan, or it's a bunch of outsiders, because from my perspective, it's quite the reverse to that. It's just the most beautiful evolution of a community doing something for itself, and that's really quite special, win or lose, I think.
Well, also, I just feel like it's got so much more power than when you might pay someone by the hour to go and hand out leaflets, or, you know, deliver leaflets to a letterbox. Like, it's come from people who really care.
Yeah, and it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. I mean, if you're going to be their person, making sure that you are there listening to them all the time is a huge thing to undertake. Are you, you know, at all anxious about that?
Oh, look, I actually really enjoy that part of it. I think, having been a journalist for so long, and the thing that I enjoyed most about being a journalist, particularly when I was working in the ABC's rural department, and then that evolved to me becoming a foreign correspondent, was speaking to people in their own environment. You know, I've spent lots of time in the halls of power, if you like, and interviewed presidents and prime ministers and such. But the things that I remember most are those moments with just real people in their own world, you know, getting a perspective on something that I don't know about, and trying to bring that window into the world home to Australian audiences. So that listening and learning, and then trying to purvey that position, is sort of quite natural to me, and that's the bit that I really like. I mean, I guess the extension of that is to really synthesize those priorities against, for example, expert analysis and what might be on the radar of the government of the day, in order to take the views of the community forward in a genuine fashion.
So, talking of the government of the day, there's so much talk around the fact that you need to declare now who you will vote with in Parliament for whichever bill that might be discussed at the time. And I feel like, is that a misunderstanding of our political system? Because surely the point of being on the crossbench is you choose who you support.
Merits.
But based on the bill, surely?
Yeah, I've been interested to see a few people sort of stepping into this conversation. Barry Cassidy, the former Insiders host, made a comment on social media the other day saying that if you did declare a sort of preset allegiance, you wouldn't be an independent. So it's actually the antithesis of what I'm trying to do. But I think that there's two things that are being sort of merged. One is that if it's a genuine hung parliament and one of the independents has to guarantee supply, that is the budget and finance to keep the country running, then you might have to choose a side at that moment to say, okay, you can continue to pay the public service and we can continue to keep the country moving forward. But that doesn't mean that you're then going to vote with that side of politics into infinity. I think that's where the misunderstanding is, because, you know, my position has always been that I'm not going to be making any deals. You know, I'm not going to get elected as an independent and then suddenly become like a sort of proxy member of either the coalition or the Labor Party. Every piece of legislation and policy will be analysed on its merits. That's the whole point of doing what I'm doing, which, you know, at its core is about holding the major parties to account, because I think accountability is what we're really missing.
Yeah, that does come through. And the pressure on politicians to answer questions about ICAC has been, you know, I think grossly underestimated by the LNP, or they're pretending it's been underestimated. But it does seem to come up a lot. People do want a federal ICAC. Is that your experience in Goldstein?
It is. And the thing is that I think it's broader than an ICAC, an anti-corruption commission. It goes to an integrity system. So that's about a code of conduct for elected representatives. That's about registration of lobbyists and opening of ministerial diaries, so we know who's speaking to who about what and why. That's about caps on political donations and transparency. That's about protection of whistleblowers and also truth in political advertising. So I think the penny's dropped for a lot of people, actually, that integrity and accountability is the overarching problem across just about every policy area. If you consider, well, why is our climate policy the way it is? Who's influencing that conversation in the background, and therefore why are decisions made in a particular way? And, one of the things that's sort of, for obvious and perfectly legitimate reasons, come up of late is that the main concern for many people right now is the cost of living, obviously. But that also goes to transparent and appropriate use of taxpayers' money in economic management. So again, it comes back to the integrity, and then it sort of flows into pork barrelling and rorting and who's spending money where and why, and is that being done in the right way. So the integrity piece, I think, is really central to a lot of the conversations that I'm having.
Yeah, and I think it really came out in that debate with Dr. Ryan and Josh Frydenberg that nobody really knows why certain places, like Gina Reinhardt's school, got such a huge amount of money. It was over $4 million, I think. And, other services like the Royal Children's Hospital is scraping by on $3.5 million per year. These are the things, I think, during that period of COVID where watching people like Harvey Norman get these vast sums of money from JobKeeper, that really tipped people who maybe weren't normally interested in politics, suddenly going, well, hang on, that's just seems completely outrageous and unfair, and why?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an anecdote floating around in Goldstein, and I won't sort of be too specific, but there was a local sports club having a lunch on last weekend, and the people who were there, or the crowd, were told by the person speaking, make sure you vote for the incumbent because he's promised X number of $1 million to fund XYZ for the sport club. So, I'm not denying that club perhaps needs that money, but when that happens just before an election, that's kind of overt vote buying, isn't it?
Yeah, justice has to be seen to be done as well as being done, and it doesn't seem it would be that hard to say that's a really outrageously inappropriate thing to say, because you have to be seen to be being even-handed. That's what transparency is about too.
Well, and also because it just favours incumbency, as so much of our system does, I'm realising. Even the calling of the election, for example, no one but the incumbent government knows when the election's going to be. So everyone's kind of walking on eggshells for months, sort of thinking, should we prepare our campaign, or what should we do, kind of thing. And so it's the same thing with this sort of pork barrelling, because the only one who can really sort of promise that is the incumbent member. I guess, maybe the opposition can then match it, but it makes it very difficult because whoever's in opposition is sort of playing catch up on the pork barrelling, and then it just becomes, fight over rorted grants.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of talk around the donations that you may have received, and that you're actually a part of a political party that's secretly controlled by all these sort of cashed up people in the background, and actually the independents are in fact a party. What do you say to all of those sorts of allegations that constantly are being written about?
Yeah, so I've tried to be as transparent as I can. So we have all of the donations on the website, and that's updated daily, and that's all done within AEC rules. So at this point in total, I think the campaign's raised about $1.4 million, which is a huge amount of money. And about 470,000 of that has come from the Climate 200 group, which is a crowd-funded organisation that's designed to help level the playing field for independents. So that's the organisation that was founded by Simon Holmes à Court, but it has, as I said, 10,000 plus donors from across the country. And then donors who've given money direct to my campaign now number over 2,000, and we've raised almost $950,000 from not only within Goldstein, but also people in neighbouring electorates. So I think what that reflects, as you can see from those numbers, we've raised double what we've received from Climate 200, and that reflects the level of interest and support that the campaign has. And the beautiful thing about that is that some of those donations are $10.
It's lovely.
Some of them are tens of thousands of dollars, but it reflects the broad spectrum of the community and the fact that people care and they've made a donation to a democratic process.
But exactly as you talk about the incumbent, they have a budget with which to campaign.
Yeah.
Mm.
Are they declaring where that money comes from?
Well, they're meant to.
They're meant to.
They're meant to, but we don't know
They're
all
not.
the things. No.
They're not declaring anything, and they actually don't have to declare it until, it doesn't come out publicly until potentially 18 months after the election. So, it's all very well and good to demand that I declare where my money's coming from, which I am, but then not to reveal anything about where your money's coming from. It's the ultimate double standard.
Yeah, and it does lead to that sense of entitlement. I was really interested in hearing some media commentary saying, these teal seats are going to be taken by people who've rightfully held that seat for so and so, from Wentworth to Goldstein to Kooyong. And I think, gosh, really? I didn't know that people got born with a seat handed to them. Do you find that sense of entitlement kind of overwhelming sometimes, Zoe?
There is a sense of entitlement, that's for sure. I mean, I think that, though, as I said, I'm being carried along by a community movement, and that creates a different set of responsibilities for me, but also a different kind of energy around the campaign, because it's genuinely being buoyed by people in the community who want to see a change. And, the other thing that I would note is that the seat's named after Vida Goldstein, who was a world-renowned suffragist who helped Australian women get the vote back around the turn of the century. And I do very much keep that close to my heart, and it's a great privilege to be running in a seat that hasn't had a female member, that's named after a woman like Vida, who was an absolute powerhouse in any era, let alone the era in which she was operating.
Well, you talk about women, and Annabelle Crabb tweeted this week, "I'm astonished by how unprepared both major parties are to cope with the power and anger behind the women's vote at this election." So to finish up, Zoe, will it be the women that make the difference this year?
Well, anecdotally, I find that I have a lot of support from women across the age and cultural spectrum. And, when I'm talking to people in the street or trying to, sell what sort of policies I'm talking about and what I want to achieve, I often find that the most difficult group is older men to convince, but the older women are often on board already. And I would say that I was at pre-poll yesterday for most of the day, and there were several older women who walked out and gave me a bit of a wink as they exited the booth. So I'm taking that as positive.
Oh, poker faces there in Goldstein. Yeah. That's gorgeous.
I
That's
love
really
it.
Sweet. Yeah.
We should ask, though, should you get elected, what's the first thing you do?
Well, it will depend, Joe, whether it's a hung parliament or what the numbers look like, because, that will really dictate just how things can be done. But I think that my three priorities are very self-evident: climate, integrity and equality. So it's to do with getting legislated climate targets and speeding up renewable energy. It's to do with getting an integrity commission and the sort of system that we talked about. And it's to do with getting the Respect at Work recommendations implemented, the parliamentary behaviour recommendations implemented, and a 10-year strategy for violence against women and children that's depoliticised, so that we can actually get some action on those things. And then there's a deeper core, I think, around the gender wage gap, superannuation, being paid on parental leave, for example, and extending paid parental leave and universal childcare, so that women and girls can maximise their contribution, both in a social context, but also in an economic context for our country. It's very exciting.
Oh, it's a beautiful
it's
to-do
kind of
list.
Everything. It's everything.
It's a great to-do list. And
for you.
we hope you get to do it. Thanks so much for your amazing generosity as always, Zoe, and all the best on the trail today.
Yeah, go well.
So good to be on Broad Radio. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Zoe. Take care. Well, what a courageous woman Zoe Daniel is for putting her hand up. Anybody who's willing to go, yes, I'll do it.
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a few people who get anxious about the thought of doing that. I mean, could you imagine anything worse for yourself?
Couldn't imagine a worse
Me neither.
thing. However, I want to acknowledge the courage that you brought to what you did with Shebah, George.
Darling, yeah.
So for people who aren't aware of this story, and I think it's a story worth retelling in amongst, entrepreneurship and startups in Australia, because you basically shifted the dial a little bit.
Yeah.
Take us back to right at the beginning of Shebah.
Okay, so in 2016, I thought I would like to be able to drive for a rideshare service to earn a bit of extra money. Looked at Uber, thought that's a bit scary. Why isn't there one where women can drive women and we can take kids as well? And so I invented Shebah and looked at all the data and, managed to get all the, different exemptions from discrimination acts, and then managed to build the app, and then started the app in Melbourne and Brisbane, and then went national over 3 years, raised quite a lot of money, raised about $3 million.
Broke a
record for Birchall, which was a crowdfunding. I noticed Zoe talking about crowdfunding there with the climate issue, and I think it was a very equitable way to enable drivers and riders to share in the asset, and everything was going swimmingly. And then, COVID hit, and it hung around. I don't know if you noticed that, but it wasn't the 2 weeks that we anticipated.
It really took hold.
Just go home for 2 weeks, and when you come back, it'll all be back to normal.
Can you believe they said
We
that?
actually thought that. This will be done. 6 weeks max.
Yeah.
Max.
Can't be that serious.
So that just really, we made immediate cuts and changes and thought we'd hang on. And then we made more cuts and changes. So we went from a staff of 42 at headquarters to a staff of 5 over 2 years, just trying to keep it all afloat. And eventually we just got to, September last year and thought we need to put this baby into administration, which really just means you're looking at your cash flow. So revenue dropped by more than 80%. And we're looking at our cash flow and thought we'll take it into administration, and then hopefully someone will buy it and they can buy it and keep the service going, and that will be great. And that's exactly what happened. So that was terrific. And then I've been with them ever since. But then, the last couple of weeks, thought, no, this isn't really quite the right fit for me anymore. So out.
Walked away from this baby that you birthed was raising.
Yeah, cleaned the meconium off it. Just did all of that.
I mean, you got 4 children of your own, and then on
own.
top of that, you have created something that really, it's a first in Australia, and it came from that place that women have a need.
Yeah.
Which was the first thing you and I, when we started speaking about Broad Radio, and I looked to you and said, I need help, can you mentor me?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things you told me, that it's about responding to a need. You did do that.
Yeah, we did need. And no one was providing this space or could see the potential. I mean, the number of people that keep saying, oh, but it's so niche. And I go, oh, no, yeah, women aren't niche and children aren't niche. I don't know if you remember, but you were once one. And we were the only service provider for children.
Yes.
You can't put a child unaccompanied in an Uber, but people do all the time. And because they're desperate, there's no one else who's going to come and pick you up. I mean, we just have ridiculous laws in this country where it's illegal to leave a child at home alone, but there is no pension or anything for women who've got little kids after the child turns 6. So by the time your youngest child is 6, you're meant to be back in full-time work. But work finishes at 5:30 and school finishes at 3:30, and no one has ever been able to manage that 2-hour gap. Certainly no employers that I've ever had. And, unless you're doing something that is shift work and it finishes at 3 o'clock, maybe, if you do nursing or something, you're okay. But for everyone else,
but
then
also,
they miss out on the mornings.
Well, and the other thing is that, so there's after school care, but if you have a child who may wish to, I don't know, play a sport like other kids.
God help you. Or an instrument. But not all schools have after school care. So
it's true.
A lot of people say that and you're like, well, that's great. But if your local primary school doesn't have that, what are you going to do? Change schools?
So I guess I want to understand this term administration, because I suppose people who have not been in business, and I'm new to business, right? They would have read a headline.
Yes.
Shebah's gone into administration.
Yep.
And there's a sense of, does that mean the business is a failure.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Yeah.
What does that mean about how the business was run?
Yes.
And it's not about a failure. Like, I see this as you were looking at your options and going, the most responsible thing to do here
I had to do it.
is this step.
Yeah, you're told, if you don't have enough money to pay your staff their entitlements and their wages, then you're trading insolvent. And that's when you're really naughty. You'll get a really big whack for trading insolvently. And I didn't want to do that. So we decided not to do that and to take it into... Then you have to find an administrator who is prepared to assume ownership of your business, which is what the administrator does. They assume all the responsibilities of running your business and trying to find a buyer for the business. So it doesn't then have to go from administration into liquidation. Mm-hmm. And that's when it's like there's nothing left. People are coming to buy your chairs and your tables and all of that stuff. So we didn't go into liquidation. We went into administration, and an administrator very thankfully took over the running of the business and found a buyer, and the buyers have come in now and taken over.
Mm. So how does that feel for you? Because the business has been quite a public, like there's been a lot of PR around what you've created with Shebah, rightly so.
Well,
I
it
think,
also caused a lot of, it was a good clickbait thing for a lot of media people to say, oh, women's only this. And then you get all the standard trolls going, oh, men's haircuts and what if, like just stupid. We should be allowed, why would women want to travel on their own? And, oh, if men did this, they'd be outraged. You go, well, men have done it. Like every taxi is driven by a man. And nearly, like 94% of cab drivers are male and 90% of Uber drivers are male. So you've already got it.
But how does it feel for you to know that now that narrative is out there?
Look, fine. I think once I made the decision, yes, I'm in good company. There's lots and lots of businesses that through COVID, if you can't sell, if you can't work, if you can't drive people anywhere and there's no cash coming in, you don't really have a choice, and you don't really know how to take it. Yeah, you can't just keep going. You have to stop it. So there's no other choice really, and I think a lot of people would, if they know anything about business, they'll understand that, and if they don't, well, I don't really care what their opinion is.
Yeah, I love that, because I think we are often crippled by other people's opinions such that we don't make the responsible decision.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think once you realise that no one's really thinking much about you anyway, like, that's the thing about life. No one really cares about anything you do except for you. And if you're... It's true.
What was that thing you told me once about the Oscar? Who was it?
Oh, yeah, Warren Beatty read out the wrong name of the Oscar winner, and he got up the next day and had a poo and ate his breakfast, and, life went on. And if you can do that, if you can mispronounce if you can wrongly give the best actor award to the wrong person and live to thrive another day, yeah, okay, no one actually gives a toss about anything I'm doing or anything you're doing or anything.
I think that people, though, we fall into the trap of defining ourselves by external validation.
Yes.
So the model that we're sort of being forced to follow as female entrepreneurs is the kind of business that men have set up basically through the decades.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is that ego-driven business, and that's how you define yourself as a person.
Yeah, and it's very toxic. It's very, winners and losers and haves and have-nots, and it's not really collaborative, and I don't think it's really sustainable. I think going back to what Zoe Daniel was talking about, running on the platform of bringing women into things and equity and caring for the environment, they all sort of go hand in hand, I think. And you have to break away from that, kill it, shag it, sell it mentality to resources and people, which is highly toxic. And it has been part of the kind of general patriarchal approach to capitalism of winners and losers, haves and have-nots. Every interaction is a contest, and it's really not.
And the difference between scarcity and abundance, and that we're just taught this scarcity mindset
all the time.
It's mine, and I have to protect mine, rather than it's total abundance and there's enough to go around.
Heaps to go around, and really you don't need as much as you think you need. You actually don't need, better sheets. Like, you have money or don't have money, you just like drive a better car and have better sheets, really.
Yeah.
And
I mean, sheets are nice.
Sheets are nice, and you don't want to sleep on the ticking, but at the same time, it's fine to just have normal sheets.
Yeah,
You
it's
know.
fine to have normal sheets.
It's fine. You'll be all right.
I'd like to mention there's lots of people engaging in this conversation. Eche is saying you did well, George. You should be so proud of creating Shebah.
thank
Are you
you.
proud?
I am proud. It's it was a big thing, and I'm thinking about things I would have done differently all the time. But I am really proud that I just took it from an idea to being alive in the world. That was the big
you really
thing.
did. You birthed it. You made. I always say that if someone makes something out of nothing, and I don't care whether it's a stand-up comedy show or a small business
picture.
or just or anything, if you've made something out of nothing, just stand back, critics.
Yeah.
Because have you made something out of nothing?
You don't get to come in. I sort of stopped caring about the critics. We got smashed a few times and had people come and give comments. I got a few death threats, nice things like that.
Oh, nice.
But it's sort of something weird about having gone through that. You just stop caring so much about what other people think. It's really what your family thinks about you and what you think about yourself. My kids are happy. I'm happy.
Yeah.
And we'll just kick on to do something else. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Acknowledging too, Donna mentions that COVID saw the end of their op shop. This is the National Homelessness Collective. And so, all around us we saw people really struggle, and it seems like now is the time, like they've managed to hold on.
Lots of restaurants.
But then now it's the time when the crisis is really
Well, if you
hitting.
didn't have enough fat, I mean, it is interesting watching major companies come along. Like a few of my friends own pubs, and they've had approaches to buy them now from, people who are going to be the winners out of all this, who giant conglomerates like Wes Farmers and people like that coming in saying, beautiful, you've got this great pub, it's in a great spot, great clientele, and you ran out of cash, so we'll come in and make you an offer.
Yeah.
And that's very tempting, I think, for people. But it's sad because it'll lead to fewer owners of these big public assets.
If you're listening, though, do please donate to the National Homeless Collective because they're amazing. And yes, to lose their op shop, I mean that
now more than ever, they need your support.
Yeah. So then, I mean, entrepreneurship is a thing that women in their 40s tend to sort of be drawn to because we want to do things on our own terms, okay? So for those of us who are diving into that, and maybe you might again go there and create something new.
Yeah.
What's your best piece of advice?
I think have a really good mission statement and know exactly what it is. What are you solving for? Whatever that is. Now, that's food related or clothing or entertainment. Who are you solving for? And not to be distracted by too many other things. So if I know exactly who my audience is and what I'm trying to do here. So you have a really good mission statement. That will just help you so much to keep, straight on the path of what it is you're trying to achieve. Otherwise I don't know, I'm a bit ADHD. I get very distracted very easily. And also other people would come to me and say, can you help us? Can you help us? And I'd have to say, look, it's really not part of our mission. It's not now anyway, not yet, maybe one day, but right now I'm solving for this. And that was getting women home safely.
What about voices in your head? How do you deal with
I have a
the
very
fear
good therapist. Get a good therapist and take whatever drugs you need. And prescribed, obviously.
Yes.
And do lots of exercise and talk to people and try to share it. If you could get a co-founder, that would be another really good thing to do. It's a lot to carry. I felt very lonely at times on this, path, and it was tough. It's tough being the founder and the CEO, and I felt quite alone, and that wasn't good. I really looked with great envy at people who were doing things, with another friend or with their partner, or think, gosh, I wish I'd done that.
Yeah, but do it.
God, don't die with the music in you. Dance.
Yes. Yeah.
Dance like nobody's watching.
I love that you're here, George, and I
thanks
do
for
want to
having me.
acknowledge the work that you put in. And I totally agree with Eche. You should absolutely be proud, darling.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll come. I'm just still coming out of the shock of it all. It's like, I just got hit by a car. Yeah, I know. It's true.
Yeah.
It's how it feels, but it's all fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You live another day. In just a moment, we're going to be speaking with adjunct Professor Kathryn Moyle to learn what it is like to live with dementia and how to and what it's like to be a carer for someone who is living with dementia. That's after this.
My workout routine comes with me wherever I go, and so does Bondi Protein.
It gives me the post-workout nutrients I need. Fuel your body with Australian-made Bondi protein.
Broad Radio. Talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9am Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Well, here are some statistics, if I can say the word. Statistics.
You can do it, Joe. You can do it.
These are some statistics that I've heard often, and maybe you have also. Dementia is the second leading cause of death in Australia and the leading cause of death for women. But for someone living with dementia or caring for a loved one with dementia, what challenges are you facing every day? To learn about this, we're really pleased to welcome Adjunct Professor Kathryn Moyle and Dementia Australia advocate. I apologise for my stumbling. I was out late last night, Kathryn. Good morning. It's lovely to have you.
Yeah, good morning. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much for joining us. You want to go first?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Kathryn, your partner Chris is living with dementia. When was he diagnosed and how did that come about?
Yes, Chris was diagnosed in 2016. And it came about because over the course of several years prior to his diagnosis, I'd noticed that him sleeping a lot, more than what would be considered normal. So, for example, he would sleep sometimes up to 20 hours in a day. And his behaviours were becoming erratic and incomprehensible to me. He wasn't the person that I had been living with for the previous 20 years. So after some fairly tough discussions, I was able to get him to a GP, and long things short, he was diagnosed with something called frontotemporal dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is just one kind of dementia. There's lots and lots of different types of dementia. Alzheimer's is probably the one that most people would be familiar with, but there are many, many different types of dementia. And at the same time as that was happening, my mother was also becoming ill, and subsequently she was diagnosed with dementia. So the last decade has been full of excitement.
Have you learned a lot about dementia? Is there anything, Kathryn, that you think, wow, I wish more people knew that this was a sign of dementia, or this was a precursor, or things like that, that our people who are listening and watching today will know maybe some of the signs that perhaps are less well discussed?
Yes. I think one of the signs that is probably not well discussed is the inability to organise yourself, or to get lost in fairly familiar surroundings. So people like to stereotype dementia as simply memory loss, and that's okay, because for lots and lots of people, there's over 300,000, maybe 400,000 families having someone live with them living with dementia. So it's something that a lot of people come across in their lives, I think. And their first experience probably is noticing when people's memory isn't so good. But memory loss isn't just the only indicator. So I'll tell you a little story. One of the things that I noticed was that I was at work, and my partner Chris was accompanying me at that work in Brisbane. This is before he was diagnosed. And we were staying in a hotel, and the lift was absolutely chockers. It was completely full as we were coming down. At the second floor, there was no way anybody else could possibly get in the lift. The doors open up, and I, with great respect, make the comment that there were two very obese people waiting to get in the lift. And there was no way, even if they were children, they were going to be able to fit in this lift. In front of the whole lift and to these people, he says, "You're too fat to fit." And I was absolutely mortified. Thankfully, the doors closed, but the entire lift took it, and it was full, took this big inhalation because it was so antisocial. It's so outside of what we expect people to do and behave. And I went, oh, that's not normal for my partner.
Yeah, he's not normally someone who's inappropriate like that. It was out of character.
No.
Yeah.
Very out of character. So they were small indicators along the way. And there's all sorts of different things that can indicate dementia. But for me, the biggest one is for that behaviour to be well and truly outside of what your own experience with that person is.
Yeah, it's
right.
like
So
a
if
brain
you were,
injury almost.
Yeah. If you're actually married to someone who is a bit of an asshole, who would say
you may
that.
not know.
It's not out of character at all.
No.
But, exactly.
So I don't mean to make light of the situation at all, Kathryn, because I imagine that process of being diagnosed must be terribly distressing for you and for Chris.
Yes, at one level it is, and at another level it's not. Dementia is for a lot of people, it's a slowly progressive disease. For some people, it's really quick, but from beginning to death, or from diagnosis to death. But for a lot of people, it's actually very, very slow. So the changes in behaviour can be very, they can go unnoticed for a long period of time, but they add up over time. So in our relationship, I was really to the point of, do I really stay in this relationship if this is how he's going to be? This is not okay behaviour. So after that building up over a long period of time, as a couple, we had to weigh out what was important, and he agreed to come with me to the doctors to find out what could be done. As I said, the GP then sent us to a geriatrician. The geriatrician did something called a PET scan, which is where the brain is actually scanned and they can see what the damage is to your brain. And unfortunately, my partner's diagnosis came back with frontotemporal dementia. So he does not have Alzheimer's because that's a different chemical construction in the brain, but he does have that. When we got that diagnosis, and notice that it becomes an all pervasive kind of thing. So one of the challenge, I'll finish that story and then when we got that diagnosis, it was actually a relief because then there was labelling we could give to what some of the things that have been happening. It's not to say, as you say, that if someone's an arsehole, they're an arsehole. So you've got to weigh up which is which. But at the same time, we were able to label a certain set of behaviours into that. We then decided after a period of time, we would actually share that information with others because we felt there was such a stigma to a diagnosis of dementia, and we wanted to change that. It's a double-edged sword for us.
That makes sense, doesn't it? When you can start treating something as a medical neurological problem rather than just somebody who's suddenly becoming incredibly tactless or entitled or bullying or whatever attributes that are existing, to be able to then come from a place of sympathy and regard. I mean, it must be exhausting for you, though. Have you found that you've had enough support from the GP, from the health professionals, from various other sources?
Yeah. I've learned that I have to ask for it, and that I find has been very difficult. I don't come from a background where it's easy to ask for help.
Sure.
Dementia Australia has a lot of resources out there, and I've really wanted to learn about the disease, as has Chris, my partner. He's also voracious about reading proper journal articles, and I participate on. As a Dementia Australia advocate, I participate on something called the Dementia Australia Research Foundation, which is a foundation that supports research and development specifically on the various types of dementias, and seeing those proposals of the current research in medical research and social and cultural research has helped me to stay on top of what is the current thinking and so on for dementia. But it is exhausting because there's so many different behaviours and that have to be managed, and as Chris's health declines, that the weight of responsibility on me to make sure that everything works properly and he has what he needs is really demanding. And to do that both for my mother, who is in aged care, which is one system, and then for home care, which is another system, and just the daily routines of life, that starts to be very wearing.
Yeah, you need a medal. You need an award.
Something like
we
that.
need a national holiday in your honour. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, you're an adjunct professor, so you have a experience and a long, career in research. Has that assisted you? And what would someone do if they don't have that?
Yeah. I really have found that having a research background has helped enormously, because there is help out there. Navigating that help is very difficult, I found anyway, partly because it's navigating different government departments that are all expected to work in collaboration with each other. So, for example, Centrelink is involved. If you're under 65, it's the NDIS. If you're over 65, it's My Aged Care. Social services get involved. And then in terms of assessments for people to make decisions about what sort of care they are entitled to from the government, that involves assessments and so on with local care, medical caregivers. It is a very complex web of people that need to be involved and policies that are interacting with each other. So I've found that I've spent a lot of time trying to work out how these policies work. How you do that when you don't have a background in research is just mind-boggling for me. I just feel so sorry for those people that do not have that kind of level of background and or resources to be able to find these things out. Thankfully, as I said, there are a number of support agencies out there, including Dementia Australia, which do provide a lot of support for people. I would just like to add before we finish up that one of the key pieces of information that I never understood until my mother went into aged care is I see friends around me all that think that their downsized home is their last home, that they're not going to move again. But unfortunately, if you get dementia, as you say, a lot of women are subject to that. The ability to move into an aged care home, if you don't have the equivalent equity in your home to be able to cover that bed, means that you're going to be in your last years in a very difficult financial position. So getting support from Dementia Australia or other financial organisations. Dementia Australia is not a financial support organisation, but it'll direct you to those. Or getting financial advice is absolutely fundamental if as soon as someone gets diagnosed with dementia, because the trajectory could well end up in aged care. And if you don't have that equity in your own home, then you're going to be in a very difficult position. Sorry to end up on a downer.
No,
it's scary.
It is scary, and it leads me back to, Donna Stolzenberg, who is one of our greatest supporters, and we support her as well with National Homeless Collective, because of course we're seeing
another home.
It's the women over 55 is the fastest growing.
I couldn't get a house after a divorce, and that's a lot of women like me.
Yes,
post-divorce, no house for you.
Yeah,
but anyway, it's tricky. It's very, very tricky.
Well, I mean,
Kathryn, you're amazing.
I think, Kathryn, you allude to a cascading problem, which maybe can be addressed depending on how we vote on the 21st.
Yes, get out and vote. And thank you for your time, Kathryn. You're amazing. I really would give you a national holiday if it was within my power. Yeah. And all the carers, you are extraordinary people.
Yeah.
Good on Dementia Australia as well.
Yes. And if you feel inclined, you can always donate to Dementia Australia as well, because they do incredible work as far as advocacy and, the amount of research that is required to maybe find us find a cure for dementia, Kathryn.
That'd be good. That'd be really good.
Yeah.
It's not curable at the moment. It isn't. It leads to inevitable death, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, as we were saying hello earlier this morning, you said that you just had your first respite holiday in, probably a decade as a carer for your mum and for your partner. So I'm happy that you had that holiday, and we wish you maybe just a little bit of respite this week.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks,
Kathryn.
and I hope to do it again.
Yes. Thanks so much, Kathryn.
Bye.
George, that's our show today.
Oh, that was so much fun. Thank you for letting me play with you.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. Thank you for coming in. And I tell you, we've gone full circle because this is our last day in this particular studio.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, do I get to steal something as a memento?
No, we need it. We are moving out of Castaway Studios. Firstly, I have to say thank you to Castaway Studios for your support over the last 6 or so months. I think we've been in here. It's been a really critical transition for us from what was a home studio in my house to here, and now we're moving into a Broad Radio HQ, our own little space. So we're bumping out today from here, and next Tuesday you'll see us in whatever guise that might be. Look, it could be a bumpy road to begin with as we start setting up that new
life
space.
Without bumps? You need the bumps.
That's right, and we're nothing if not transparent about those things. Oopsie. So we'll see you next week from BRHQ. Can't wait for that.